Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Coast-to-Coast Combat Hour. I'm your host, Matthew Hawkins, along with my co-host, Ed Carbajal. And on a weekly basis, we plan to bring you the biggest news and interviews in the world of combat sports. Ed, how you doing, my man?
All right, not bad. We're doing pretty good, actually. I'm excited to have Yuri return to help us with the breakdown for the upcoming weekend's big fight.
Yeah, we got UFC 231 to look forward to, and Yuri being one of our donators online. We promised that we would bring those guys on that were willing to put some money into the show and give them a chance to vocalize their opinions to the audience. So, Yuri, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Good to see you guys.
Nice having you back.
So, before we get into 231, we had a pretty stacked weekend of action. We had two UFC cards, we had two Bellator cards. There was a Bellator kickboxing event, there was a KSW event. Um, but it pretty much started off Friday night with Bellator 210. And John Salter's submission victory over Chidi Njokuani. Kind of what I expected. You guys shocked at all by that result?
No, I wasn't.
No, I can't say that I was. You were right.
Yeah, I just thought Salter would use his ground game. Njokuani's really a good fighter when you get him against another striker. Him versus Melvin Manhoff would have been a hell of a fight. But his submission game just isn't on par with the submission and wrestling game of.
No, it's a smart way to fight a guy, a rangy guy like that. So Salter was definitely. I mean, I actually thought he might have gotten clipped with something, but as soon as he got wrapped around him and closed the distance, I wasn't surprised at all with the result. I mean, overall, the weekend was kind of exhausting for a fight fan. It was like a lot to keep up with.
No, it was funny. My brother made a joke. I was visiting family, and after seeing what it's like for me on a weekend, they said to Matt, "You really don't ever go to bed. You just take naps between fights." And it was kind of the truth this weekend. A lot of action. Also on that card, I mean, this is the Bellator card that just had the stacked prelims, top to bottom.
Yeah.
We had mentioned that, I thought the Goiti Yamauchi and Daniel Weichel fight really probably should have been the main event based off of off their career accolades. But, Yamauchi earned a split decision in a very, very close fight. Definitely wasn't the most exciting fight of the night, but a huge win for him.
Absolutely, man. I mean, a lot of fights on that I don't know understand. And Bellator seems to be racking up all these like double back-to-back events. I don't know if you saw today. They're gonna do one in February. They got another one coming up this month. So they're gonna do a whole weekend at Mohegan Sun in February, with the MVP Daily announcement. I think the Mitrione and Sergey Karatanov, yeah, are on that card. And then the prelims, like you said, the Bellator 210 was just crazy stacked. Like even Joe Warren, I'm used to seeing Joe Warren on a main event broadcast. I mean, granted, I was bothers me. He's like a Bellator staple, so to see him lose the way he did always bothered me. Just because he's like one of the fighters that I followed from like the MTV2 days of Bellator. So
yeah, he's been there. I mean, since day one. Him and Michael Chandler have really always kind of been the faces of Bellator from the early tournament days. Joe Warren got into the game late. And I think now he's just kind of as fighters keep evolving and he continues to try to fight the younger upcoming talent. I just think it just catches up with him. He's going to start having injuries. Did he have a broke? I think they said he didn't break his collarbone, but it was a stinger. But that's just injuries. I think he's going to start to get. I'm not sure his exact age, but he's approaching 40 or in his early 40s, isn't he?
Yeah, he's definitely up there. I mean, I don't want to say he's as old as I am. He's maybe a year or two younger, but he definitely needs to. I mean, I know he's got one fight left on his contract, so maybe he needs to start thinking about what to do when he's done fighting. But Yuri, how do you when you watch the fights? And I know how Matt does it, and I know how I do. But like when you're stacked up on fights the way we were last week, and how do you handle it? Like, how do you schedule it? Do you take naps? You do coffee? What do you do?
Well, all the above. So yeah, I've got I'm juggling kids, so
Oh wow.
it's getting like, and then you got buddies, and you got a fight party, and you got all this and that going on. So I had a spread, and then kind of just brought it out the next day too, and picked out the bad stuff, left the good stuff there for the guys. You got to have plenty of beer. That's what it is. But no, it's yeah. I mean, the first day, yeah, you got to pace yourself, right? It's like a fight.
Yeah,
You got to
yeah.
pace yourself.
So you said you have kids, so you're used to not getting that much sleep then.
Yeah, for the last 17 years, nothing but gray hair over here. So yeah,
Cool.
What?
it was a super Saturday. I mean, it was like a super fight weekend, though. I mean, I don't remember a time where they've double stacked a Bellator and a UFC, and
Me
then they
neither.
had World Championship boxing. That was awesome, and then the others you mentioned. So I thought it was dope. I just tried to pace myself, stay off the internet for the results on the Bellator, because they do that in Italy and Israel. We have that issue, and they'll sort it out. And to hit on your point is like, what are they doing? Why are they stacking it like that? I think I don't know either. I really don't, but I kind of trust it because if you take, I mean, you mentioned MTV2, and in the beginning it was ESPN Deportes back in
Yeah.
1 through 15 or whatever it was, and but then you just kind of look at it since Scotty took over, and good things are happening. Good people. It's like Strike Force 2, so. I'm just gonna trust it. I mean, that was really cool because that's probably I don't watch a whole lot of prelims, honestly. UFC, these guys, I'll wait 2, 3, 4 fights until they start coming on before getting to know them generally. But this one was worth watching for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, I got a quick shout out. I don't know if you see what I'm wearing here. So today, the Seattle announced the NHL team that we've been waiting for 100 years.
Oh, okay. Is it good? Is
Yeah,
that
so
is that the name?
that's the Sonics. Where we're trying to get the Seattle Sonics back in town.
That's the basketball team that went to Vancouver and then to Memphis and
OKC.
OKC.
OKC. We love. Who are our picks? We had Kevin Durant came to Seattle, and like everybody, we kick him out so they can go win championships elsewhere.
Yeah,
Anyway,
the only thing good about Supersonics is that they were mentioned in a Too Short song. Otherwise it's Lake Show here on the West Coast.
Wow.
But that's
Yeah, I only watch a fight, so I have no comment.
so. But getting back to it real quick to finish off the Bellator talk for the 210 card. Joe Schilling came back, had a nice big TKO win in a bloodbath. Finished his opponent who did corner basically threw in the towel. Saved him unneeded punishment. Juan Archuleta came back again and got a dominating decision, opening himself up for possible title shot in a couple divisions, depending on what they want to do with him. David Rickles in the co-main event got a win. Kind of a surprise to me. I thought he was kind of at the end of his run. I think I was also shocked to find out. I believe he's only 29 years old, which I would have been off by about 8 or 9 years if you would have asked me.
And nobody ages is like I do. I'm the only
And
one
I know,
that ages beautifully.
and I know one of Yuri's favorites and one of my favorite female fighters, Christina Williams.
Oh yeah, that was a good fight actually.
Yeah, her and Bruna Ellen's a tough woman also, and
Yeah,
it was a good fight.
true test. That was a true test for Williams, considering I mean she beat Heather Hardy, who was new to the sport. It was a big win for. It was a big name, but not a big win as far as like quality mixed martial artists. And then who'd she I forget who she fought after that. Somebody a little more seasoned, and I think Bruna was probably the most seasoned person she's ever fought. So that's definitely that's definitely got her her name in other people's minds now.
Yeah, it's probably her biggest season win. She fought Valerie Letourneau in her previous
That's
fight.
right. That's what.
And suffered a really, I think it was a split decision, or it was 29-28. I can't
Close.
recall. That was at Bellator 193. I was actually at the fight, but So that took care of Bellator for Friday night, and then you turned over your TV or you flipped your DVR over to the Ultimate Fighter, and obviously, the Ultimate Fighter in itself, we've talked about, has lost a lot of luster. And this season just seemed kind of strange to me. But just to throw out the winners, the women's featherweight winner was Macy Chazon. Um, she
That's right.
won. She won her fight by second round rear naked choke, so she becomes the first featherweight Ultimate Fighter female winner. And down the road probably will get crushed by Cyborg, like everybody else. The heavyweight Juan Diepa um, defeated Justin Frazier, submission first round. Juan's got some definitely shows some promise, but it's it. I don't see any of these guys hanging with the top 10 of the division. I don't know. Did you see either of those fights? Either of you guys?
You go ahead, Yuri.
I think I kind of tuned in for the end of the Juan fight just to see if two Juans could make one night. So, yeah, I mean, I saw that, but I didn't really catch the other one. And honestly, I haven't followed tough in, some time. So I would defer.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I definitely didn't follow this past season the way that I followed maybe the season before, but I can say that about most recent seasons. I mean, I haven't really been invested in Ultimate Fighter for a long time. I caught in because obviously I don't have. I'm always complaining about how Comcast is crappy with taking channels away from me, and I haven't subscribed to the Zone yet. I'm cutting the cord in the new year, but so I always go to a bar to watch Bellator. So I watched all the Bellator. When I got home, the Chazon fight was on, and she won. So, and I caught everything from then on. But yeah, I mean, I didn't watch an episode of the season, and I feel bad saying that because I know that's like the chance for a lot of fighters coming in. But it's oversaturated with not fights, which is kind of all I care about.
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, there's so many promotions nowadays that guys can fight everywhere. So
Yeah.
having guys that are 3-1 or 2-2, or it just doesn't pique the interest. I feel like a couple of the most famous or most fun seasons there have ever been have been when they brought back old known UFC fighters. Whether you go back to Matt Serra, Travis Luter, or you come all the way up to more recently where guys like I know Jesse Taylor won and had his issue where he's been removed from the UFC for PEDs again. But it's fighters people know that helped revitalize the career of James Krause. So I just wonder if that's more the way to go. The UFC's had almost 500 events now. I feel like there's so much more you can do and so much more interest you can get out of the fan base by bringing back fighters that people have already been a little bit attached to.
Let me ask you guys something. Just because you mentioning that just made me think of the question. With the state of the sport the way it is now and all the options out there. I mean, I don't know if you guys ever heard. I interviewed Austin Vanderford way back maybe a year ago, a little over a year ago, when he was fighting for Victory Fighting Championships, and I asked him, where he wanted to go, and obviously, his then fiance Paige Van Zant was already in the UFC, and then he went on the Contender Series. He fought, I think, and won a decision, but he didn't get a contract, and then he announced today that he's fighting for Bellator. So I don't know. I mean, do you think that the sport is at a point now that like the UFC is no longer the end of the road for them? Now they like the other options, especially with the sponsorship thing. Because look at Sage Northcutt getting signed with one, and all this Bellator Rising talk has got all the hardcore fans excited. I mean, I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah. No, I mean, you're dead right there. And I think, I have my personal opinions on it. And I think it stems back to the lawsuit, frankly, against Zuffa, kind of Carlos Newton and everybody who brought that up and kind of went forward with it, pushed hard. And then you started seeing people flock and things were happening to level the playing field. That's my take on it. that's when everybody left, and kind of, I don't know if it's going to work with the courts. Maybe in 15 years when the lawsuit's settled, but yeah, definitely. They've more options now than they ever did. Oh, phone calls, guys.
Uh,
um,
I thought that was like a ghost or something. Or
yeah. Well, at least I don't have the fire alarm this time, but yeah, there's definitely more options, and you're seeing it. Yeah, it's really cool to see guys go to one. I kind of thought I
yeah,
lost interest in one, kind of because one was like a lot like Pride, knees, elbows to the head, soccer kicks, and when they kind of, it seems like they adopted unified rules for the most part, I lost a lot of interest. And then that's one of those ones that you really have to reach out and go find one
yeah,
televised. The rest of this stuff is it's right there on our channels. So
yeah.
um, there's plenty of stuff on like the DAZN app and the Fight TV app, and I've got fights up the yin yang, and this is good for the fighters.
So really quick, just because we mentioned the zone a few times, if you guys watch when I spoke to Scott Coker in October, not only did he hint at the Caldwell Horiguchi thing and issue the challenge through my interview, but if you listen to my questions, I said to him, I'm like, do you think you and Ryzen will bring your uh, partnership or whatever, when they work together, their collaborations to DAZN, and he said that's something that they wanted to work on with the expansion in Japan, because DAZN has a Jap, like we have DAZN USA, there's a DAZN Japan. So my prediction, I'm just putting this out there now before it fucking happens. I think Ryzen's gonna jump ship from Fight and start. I mean, I would say maybe 2019 second, or maybe second quarter, you start seeing Ryzen events on the zone. That's just me being a conspiracy theorist.
Oh, it makes
Yeah.
sense. I would think that they would fight for the New Year's Eve show if
Yeah,
they're gonna, I mean, they're basically involved financially with Caldwell and his. I mean, they're a big part of that. I'd be going, hey, if that's one of our big fighters who we want to feature down the line, we want rights to this event. So yeah, that's a great idea. I hadn't even really crossed my mind, but it makes perfect sense. Um, I want to chime in real quick on, you talked about fighters going other places.
yeah,
For me, you could sign nowadays. Signing with the UFC doesn't have the luster it did before. Um, what's the point of getting buried on prelims that somebody even like a hardcore fan like Yuri doesn't necessarily catch? I mean, if you're fighting that early, a guy like Vanderfort, who, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he's undefeated, right?
yeah,
7 or 8-0. His wife now is Paige Van Zant, so he's already got a little bit of marketability, whether it's just taking pictures with his wife or advertising being an undefeated fighter. He's basically a win or two away from being the poster boy on an event for a Bellator event.
yeah.
Sage
And he's
Northcutt,
good. He's good
you know,
too.
Sage Northcutt, 6-2 in the UFC, came in a little premature to the UFC, but they basically have put him on prelims and opening fights on a fight night card. Now he's going to go to ONE FC and probably be the smack dab in the middle of the poster. It's if you're trying to build your own brand, you can't wait around. And if you're going to fight guys the caliber of the UFC, if you're trying to build your own brand, you basically got to go on a 10-fight win streak. I mean, we got guys like Kamaru Usman, who's going to be the next topic, who picked up a huge win this weekend against RDA, but I believe he's on a 9-fight win streak in UFC. And the casual fan on the street probably couldn't point him out of a lineup. And then he's headlining the last 2 or 3 events he's been in. So I think, when you get a chance to go to an organization that'll really promote you and, and help you out, especially when you're younger in your career like that. To me, that's one of the big factors I would think. Gone are the days of just saying you're a UFC fighter, when you can put up posters in your house now of being a main event or a co-main event for a Bellator or a Golden Boy. I mean, it's not necessarily for the money, but if they're gonna put you a little bit front and center, then you take the opportunity, I think, and I think that's what eventually could make you a superstar. The UFC has done a terrible job of building them, and I think guys have got to look elsewhere for the opportunity to have their face out there on flyers, on posters, on commercials. And I think that's the modern way of making money now. You can't rely on the promoter any longer.
No, you can't, and it's definitely I mean, like the opportunities for them to look elsewhere are out there though, just because of the growth of the sport, and as much as we as much as we say the UFC has transformed into something that the longtime fans are starting to dislike, it's still because of their success that these other opportunities are out there. So, the ships rising with the tide quote keeps popping in my head because a media guy said it to me in the summer of 2016, early in the summer of 2016, I was at a Combate Medicos event here in New York, and one of the guys from MMA Fight Radio said that to me, and it didn't happen as fast as we thought it would, but I mean, look at what we have now. We got a season format PFL. We've got
Yeah.
Bellator doing their tournaments for other weight classes and cross promoting, and MMA Pro League. I know they have plans for 2019 that we'll hear about in January, but it's just like, and that's a team format in MMA here in the States. So it's like now's the time to try any crazy idea that was tried in the past. Now's the time to try it because people are watching, but they're also getting tired fast of the regular 13 fights and then and pay-per-view, and that's it.
Well, you
And
mentioned
what's funny about that, yeah,
real quick. You mentioned Combate, and to throw them in the mix, they're putting together an 8-man one-night tournament this Friday night on
Yeah.
DAZN. So you talk about going back to old school. I don't know how the tournament's going to unfold.
I just published it on Front Proof. You can look at it there.
I saw the brackets. I'm just saying in general.
Oh, you mean like who wins? Yeah.
How it unfolds, whether we end up with alternates or guys with multiple losses continue. I mean, who knows how it's going to unfold? But I got to give Campbell McLaren props for.
Yeah, no, they have backups. There's alternates there.
Yeah, but it just doesn't seem like I can't remember the last tournament that went really clean. It seems like in the last 10 years when people have tried to do this, I don't know what their round format's going to be. It's real cute to have a 5-minute first fight, but if you're going to do it, especially in a country that's not going to overregulate you, just do it right. Just have your 3-round fights and move along the tournament and do it right. That's my opinion, but props to them for trying. That's on DAZN. I imagine it'll start sometime around 5 o'clock Pacific time. I haven't looked at the exact.
The DAZN needs to pay us. We mentioned them 10 times already in this.
I told you $9.99 is my. I'll sell out for $9.99 for DAZN. But go ahead, Yuri. I cut you off there when you
sorry.
You know what you're.
Yeah, I think it was basically Ed was talking about how, hey, let's try any crazy old thing. It seems like everybody's just kind of taking bits and pieces of Pride who already did it, and they're kind of doing that. So it's really the old school. I mean, they had. Yeah. I think they did. They did it all, and so we've got Strike Force or Bellator now. Let's got that ramp, and you've got PFL doing. I love what PFL's doing. Putting $1 million up. By the way, man, this New Year's Eve is going to be nuts. It's nuts.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we got Ryzen and Bellator on a 2-day. Then we got the PFL New Year's Eve. I'm not going to have time to blow off the fireworks I need to.
Well, I think Ryzen's only one event this year.
Is it?
I believe
I'm fine with that.
They're only going to be so in the United States. They'll be on our West Coast. It'll be late on December 30th. The night, and it'll run into December 31st and early, so that's fine. But and then like you said, get a quick little nap in, and then you wake up and midday on New Year's Eve, or you fight through it, and then you get an awesome night of full championship fights for PFL. So like you said, that's hard to that's what we wanted. That's what we we used to try to and try to get these funky Japanese streams for years of K1 or Inoki or whatever the heck we could get our hands on. Just to once Pride disappeared, we kind of lost that, and Dream brought it on a couple times, and I know they worked with Glorio at one time for that amazing event where it was about an 11-hour show or so. But,
and it's crazy how Yuri just mentioned how it's like it's what's old is new again, and everything's kind of been stripped out of the old days of Pride FC, because we had Lee Daly, the author of the History of Pride book. We've had him on this podcast twice, and I'm about to finish that book up, and I actually just said something similar to my editor over at mymmanews.com, because he just got his copy, and I said to him, it's funny, weird that history is repeating itself, but now it looks like all those ideas that people thought were crazy are what's selling or drawing in fans now and new fans.
I actually downloaded that for my flight home yesterday, coming back from visiting family, and got about halfway through it. So, just as for me, who actually watched a lot of it and was kind of a historian even back then, I'm pretty familiar with a lot of the stories. But some of the old wrestling, I didn't know everything that he talks about in the beginning of the book about the pro wrestling.
Yeah.
How that evolved through Japan through the 60s, 70s, 80s,
Yeah.
into the 90s. So that was really cool. And then if you're not all that familiar with Pride or how the fights actually unfolded, it's a really good breakdown of some of the biggest bouts in Pride fighting. So at least to where I've gotten to so far. So I definitely recommend the book. I know there's a mobile download is only $9.99 on Amazon. So if you
Yeah,
don't
the
want,
link is in the bio to buy through Amazon on a YouTube channel here.
well, gosh, we've got so much to get through. We better keep moving here. So obviously we talked about Kamaru Usman. Just totally dominated Rafael dos Anjos. I think my prediction was basically this. It was a little more exciting than I had initially thought the Usman fight was going to be, but I just felt like he would grind it out and really uh, stop a really exciting fighter in Dos Anjos. And maybe
Yeah,
Dos
I
Anjos.
was wrong on that one.
Yeah, you kind of, like you said, you kind of went with your heart, but I just think Dos Anjos needs to avoid these. He's fought Covington now, and then Usman. It's just stylistically, it's just a bad matchup for him. So I don't know. We'll see where he goes from here, but maybe what they make the 165-pound division, it'll open up some fights that would be fun to watch for him. Um, do you have any take on that fight, Yuri? Pretty much the same
I
thing.
thought it was, yeah. I mean, I was really impressed with Usman. I've never really thought that he was as boring as maybe some people thought he was. I like his man. He knows how to throw, and so it's fun to watch him do it. He kind of fights like I used to, so you kind of like people like that. But yeah, I mean, first off, is it Dos Anjos or Dos Anjos? Somebody's got to figure this out.
I think it's Dos Anjos because the Brazilians don't do the H sound like we Latinos do. It's not because I call them Dos Anjos for years, and then I hear the broadcasters all say Dos Anjos, so I stick with Dos Anjos.
Yeah, so I mean, after RDA was looking just crazy back in the day, a few years ago, right before Eddie Alvarez and taking on that boatload of people, he looked crazy unstoppable. And then, gee, I don't know what happened then. Anyway, kind of looks like he's going downhill. Really impressed with Usman.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I get where you're heading with that. I think he's stylistically he's taking some tough matchups, and I get not. I mean, Usman's undefeated, 9 in a row now, and Covington's no joke, and like you said, so we'll see where he goes from now. It'll never happen, but I'd love to see him fight a guy like Nate Diaz, something like that, just to or a Robbie Lawler or somebody who's going to come at him and just bring it. Or heck, maybe he decides it's time to move on and we see him fight Eddie Alvarez again in ONE FC or Sage Northcutt or something like that. I mean, some of those guys that would kind of come at him in a stand up I mean, damn, bring violence. That's for damn sure.
Yeah.
So that gets us through Friday night, and then if you woke up early Saturday morning, I know you guys. I don't think you guys caught it, but the Bellator kickboxing, just a couple notable results. Raymond Daniels, who is the welterweight champion, fought a non-title fight and won a majority decision. Tough name to pronounce, but it's Zachariah Leotini, I believe Italian fighter. But Daniels did his thing, lots of spins, and got the win. And then in the main event, the featherweight champion Gabriel Varga got his second first round knockout. This one 242 into the first round. I believe his last fight it ended about a minute and a half or so when he beat Kevin Ross. Um, to win the belt at featherweight. So that was the Bellator kickboxing highlights. And another quick highlight before we get into the other stuff was KSW held an event, another solid event. We don't really talk about them much, but it's notable because in the main event, Mamed Khalidov had a rematch against Tomas Narkom, and Narcom actually defeated him again. So it was the second loss in a row for Khalidov, and he left his gloves in the cage and retired.
Oh,
Oh wow.
And that's notable. He's 34 and 6, and prior to his loss against Narcon in March of 2018, his previous loss wasn't since May of 2010. So he basically went 8 years undefeated. It go down as one of the, in my opinion, easily one of the top 5 fighters to never fight in the UFC. But was really just an amazing fighter with some huge wins, and it really a shame that we didn't get a chance to see him showcased here in the United States more. But I just wanted to get that out there. And again, if people aren't familiar, Mamed Khalidov, look him up, watch his YouTube highlights. The guy was an absolute animal, and a top, 20 pound per pound fighter for the majority of his career.
and that's a good point too, because now just a minute ago we're talking about now that these fighters have somewhere to go. Yeah, they got multiple options where they're in the spotlight finally, and he's a guy that should have been and wasn't. And yeah, that's cool that we have these options now, and hopefully we don't see a whole lot of fighters that do the kinds of things that he did for as long as he did, that don't get the spotlight or don't get the money they deserve. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, luckily for him, KSW came along towards the last 5 years or so, give or take a little bit, and it allowed him to fight in his home country and really make some good money. I mean, I don't know how familiar people are with KSW, but they're constantly filling 15 to 20,000 seat arenas. I think they've even had a couple bigger shows, maybe in the mid 30s. They're on DAZN now too, so another pitch for DAZN. If you have it, you can watch replays, but it's really a spectacle of a show. They have the ramp, they have the laser lights. The announcer, the play-by-play guy's a little over the top. He makes Michael Chavello sound like
Oh yeah, that's right. That's the guy he's very over dramatic or whatever. I remember. Oh yeah, yeah.
He's a bit much, but the show in itself is really awesome. And that being added to the zone is nice, because I occasionally would throw 10-15 bucks towards them for some of their some of the Pudzilla fights, or when they'd have some of their freak show stuff. So and it's kind of a throwback to Pride. You talk about that, they got some like the strong men, and it's there's not a lot of drug testing, let's put it that way, in
But yeah, yeah.
KSW.
Freak
um,
show fights.
not that Khalidov falls into that category, because there's no reason to believe that he was, but definitely one of the great fighters of all time that a lot of people missed out on. That flowed right in. Well, it didn't flow right into. We had the Bellator Italy card that everybody thought was going live at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern.
That was
Uh,
replay. I thought that was live too.
No, I tuned into DAZN, and it went from your event starting shortly to watching Domingos Barros hand being raised in the co-main event.
Oh
So
wow.
DAZN went live right in the middle of the co-main event, and then showed the main event while Paramount showed the opening bout of the main card.
Oh wow, man. I guess
So
that's another reason to have it. And
well, yeah. I mean, it was. I guess it was nice because it wasn't a huge name of cards. I didn't watch it, but looking at it, there was knockouts left and right. So I kind of wish I had been a chance to actually sit and enjoy the card, as opposed to just turning it on and it being the main event.
yeah.
But I we talk up Bellator, and we all love Bellator, and we might even all argue it's our favorite promotion. But I just they got to get their stuff right, man. You can't tell fans that it's going live on Paramount and have people go on Twitter and see the results of the main event as it goes live.
I don't.
You know,
That's a confusion too that I just didn't get, because I remember when they did the announcement. I mean, I was at Viacom when they announced the partnership with the Zone this past June, and it seemed like everybody was under the impression, because I know other people wrote that. I mean, a lot of people wrote about how it was the fix for the tape delay, and it looks like it keeps happening. So that's something good that you're bringing up, because it seems to be like people are asking, like, wait a minute, what did I pay for the Zone for if I'm still getting these delayed streams or cards or whatever it is.
yeah, well, that was the selling point, was that you were going to get the European cards live, and that's fine. That's neither here nor there. I think if I'm guessing what happened was, since I watched the Bellator kickboxing event, it ended about 2 hours. So it was supposed to go live at 1 p.m. my time. About 11 a.m. the Bellator kickboxing card ended. So what I think those fights just ended way quickly, or there was just terrible planning, and they all of a sudden had an arena an hour and a half, 2 hours prior to the MMA portion kicking off, and I think they just started it earlier. And I think that that's probably what happened. I haven't heard that officially, but if I'm guessing just by the logistics of the timing of the fights that I watched, that was the only way that made sense to me. But yeah, I don't understand the complications behind it. Why isn't Bellator kickboxing on DAZN? We can ask that question too. You
Yeah.
know,
Well, I did. I mean, if again that when I spoke to Coker in October, we talked about that. I mean, that's really not him just making the decisions, though. He's got a boss that he has to answer to, and everybody else that's in charge of something has to be in agreement because it's a partnership. It's not that they all answer to one master. So that's because he said if it was up to him, he'd have submission only grappling in the cage and all this other stuff. So it's not unfortunately it's not up to him. I wish it was because we'd definitely be a lot happier if it was.
Yeah, on my take on it all is, yeah, I kind of figured, DAZN is relatively new. This deal is relatively new, and I think over time they're going to close the gap. That's the impression that I get. We'll see is how we can take it. It hasn't killed me so far. Nothing that Dream hasn't done to me before, where I'm sitting there for 3 hours, or whatever it was. But I hope that they iron it out. I mean, I think we're only seeing this in like Italy and Israel and whatnot. But now, I mean, like guys who have Comcast, it sucks. Me and Matt and others, we have Sling TV, or anybody with Dish or Direct TV or whatever you got, we kind of get that on Paramount pretty much live, and then there's a Comcast delay, at least here on the West Coast, of 3 hours, and that sucks for them. I cut the cord 5 years ago, so but I
Oh
hope the
man,
design. I kind of just get that feeling. I just kind of trust that it's going to happen in time,
me
and I'm
too.
not missing anything gigantic right now. I could miss the Italy card and not lose sleep over it. Same thing with the Israel card. But it was kind of on my part. It's like I don't have to get up for that. I get up and it's 1 p.m. I'm like, oh, all right, ready to go. Like I get up at 1 p.m. anyway. But
well, and I don't want it to be taken as I'm not bashing DAZN. They went live when they were supposed to go live, and it just turned out when their cameras turned on, they were announcing the winner of the co-main event. They replayed the whole event after that. After the main event, they showed the whole event, but it was just for me the more of the issue was just Bellator getting their timing down for television. Telling if you advertise for the entire week that it's going live for the first time ever, we're going to get to watch a European event live on Paramount. It's got to be live on Paramount.
yeah,
That's so my issue is not so much with DAZN. DAZN's fine. I love the channel. I watch the hell out of it between all the events. And and it's nice to even watch Bellator on. If you're at a place where all of a sudden you catch yourself
Yeah,
and
it's
and you
just I mean when I had my conversation with him, I know it's not that cut and dry. There's so many people in licensing agreements and making their advertisers happy. Like I'm sure they add the, like what's the thing with the pig that happened when they I forgot what it was with the cartoon show that they
where they had
yeah.
Peppa the pig or
You know
whatever
what I mean?
took
Like,
over.
like, like
Yeah.
there's too many hands in the pot, for them to. I mean, when something goes wrong on live TV, you can't fix it because it's already live TV. So I just write it off to that. It doesn't bother me as much. I mean, obviously, I'm not trying to go to a bar when I'm during my training time to watch an event, but it would be nice to have everything broadcast the way that watch it live when it's live, no matter where it's happening.
Yeah, I mean, I
as
don't mind.
advertised,
Yeah, and
as advertised would
if
be
it's
nice.
taped
Sorry.
delayed, yeah, no, you're exactly right. It's as advertised. I guess that's my thing. Bellator could have easily went on Twitter and said, "Hey, stay off Twitter for the next 2 hours. We're starting the event 2 hours prior to us actually going live. It's going to be on tape delay. If you don't want to see spoilers, don't tune in to see,
I mean,
quick."
yeah, if I hadn't even known, like I said, I was busy. I knew, I thought I was going to catch the Paramount 4 o'clock thing on my time, but I wound up getting tied up with other stuff. But which is fine because then the UFC was it Adelaide in Australia. That was the
Yeah,
one. That's what the one that I wound up tuning into. I actually
well,
have it playing in the background now.
that was part of the night. Real quick though, Alessio Sakara suffered a brutal knockout in the main event in his home country to Kent Kupanen um, in a light heavyweight bout. So uh, silenced the Italian crowd, and then that's how the Bellator weekend ended. Two events, both successful. Little issues with the broadcast, but I would say both were entertaining cards. At least everything that I caught, especially like I said, the Friday night's full card. Yeah. So then UFC kicked off in Australia, and I had it recorded, so I kind of just caught a lot of the fights that I was interested in. Um, One of the early fights was a flyweight bout. I know the flyweight division is kind of teetering right now, but Kai Kara France and Elias Garcia.
I'm
Um,
watching that now.
if you didn't see that, that's a hell of a fight. I mean, probably one of my top 10 fights at flyweight in the history of the UFC. Um, the amount of submission attempts
Yeah.
and striking the back and forth was really great. So I'd recommend fans with the ability to find that fight to do that. Um, and then obviously when you get to the main card, we both picked Justin Willis to beat Mark Hunt. Didn't turn out the way I thought. I thought Willis would try to use some wrestling. Um, I feel like that's the almost the sure way of beating Mark Hunt now.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, I guess
I,
standing and circling and throwing a
the,
few jabs. And,
well, let me ask you guys. I mean, you saw? Did you see a 2 Yuri or no?
I saw kind of most of it. My half of my eyeball was I kind of did that. I
Yeah.
had split screens,
So,
but
because
yeah, that's kind of how I saw it. It was jab, 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 and Mark Hunt looked pretty frustrated.
yeah, I was gonna say. So it looked like after the first round, Mark Hunt kind of gave up a little bit. Like, it was he's done fighting in the UFC. He said you'll see me somewhere else. Like, so it just seemed like he was like, let me just get this over with and get out of here.
yeah, I mean, I almost felt like when he got cut on his shin throwing that kick real early in the fight,
It's the
like that.
second time that happened to him, by the
It
way.
is the second time
Yeah.
it's happened to him, and it might have even happened more times in kickboxing,
Mm.
in his K1 days. But it almost felt to me like I felt like the steam was taken out of him with that, and I don't know if it's mental. I don't. Maybe he has something planned for a month from now in Japan for the New Year's Eve show. Um, but I kind of got the impression like he was like, son of a bitch, I just got a cut that could keep me out of a fight. And now I don't want to take any more damage. I mean, that's because it wasn't the typical Mark Hunt fight. You know,
Yeah.
you'd have a hard time finding me another tape of a Mark Hunt fight where he doesn't try to decapitate the dude. And there was no point where he just decided, okay, I'm going balls to the wall. I have the chin of a statue. Let me come
Yeah.
at this guy, and we didn't get that. So
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was a
It
little
just seemed
disappointing,
like
but
he wanted to fight through it and
get it over with.
yeah.
Yeah, that's the impression I got. But then the whole weekend was saved by the Pride FC legend Mauricio Shogun Hua. Uh, God,
Yeah.
bringing back the Shogun of about 10 years ago,
I
and
mean, it was a painful way to come back, though. I mean, he took a lot of damage. It had me worried for a few moments there.
yeah, oh, there's no doubt. I mean, I picked him to lose. You picked him to lose. And after about a minute of the fight, I was kind of cringing, thinking this is going to be Anthony Smith 2.0. But he used some ground game, and I think he took him down, and all of a sudden realized, okay, this isn't Rock'em Sock'em Robots, and this is how I won fights in Pride, and I this is MMA. I don't need to stand here and see who can land the hardest elbow. I can take
Yeah,
the guy down. I can wear him out. I can get him tired. I can injure the guy, whether he pulls a hamstring or, just gets a gnarly Charlie horse, which it almost looked like he did on a couple of those knees when they were in the clinch. But, it was a smart fight from Shogun, especially when he suffered some damage in the beginning. And, if he's able to stay away from the top 7 or 8 of the division and fight with a little bit more of a ground game mentality. I think he can still hang. I mean, I think he's won 4 out of 5 now. Obviously, his loss was brutal, But I don't know. It just puts a smile on my face seeing those guys win. You always wonder when the last Pride legend's gonna fight, whether it's Shogun or Fedor, or really that's where we're down to now as far as guys who are even, and correct me if I'm wrong. I can't really think of anybody else that I would say is necessarily successful right now. That has a Pride background. I mean, Mark Hunt suffered now two losses in a row, and I don't know. I just put a smile on my face, and just especially after the Mark Hunt disappointment was really nice to see for an old school fan.
So, do we know when Shogun's contract is up?
That I have no idea. I have no idea. And I guess we think about him going to Japan too to round out his career. I mean, I imagine that's possibly on the table for all these guys.
I think anybody that fought there wouldn't mind putting in some final rounds there. I mean, Crow Cop's doing it. Coker talked about bringing Fedor there to do his cross promotional stuff. I don't think that's something that's probably more on the table than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, I think for Bellator to give up their guys to go there, I think it should just be fights that generally make sense. The Horiguchi fight with Caldwell makes sense. It's champion versus champion. If Fedor wins the Grand Prix and becomes the Bellator heavyweight champion, I think a fight with Crow Cop, who was the open weight tournament champion, I think that it would sell no matter what. But I think it's a fight that where you got guys who aren't necessarily at the top of the game that they were 10 years ago, but you can still sell it as a champion versus a champion fight. And it, for me, that adds to the stigma of the event. Obviously a Bellator versus Ryzen card would be awesome, but if it's going to be a mixed card, but if Bellator is just going to selectively hand their guys over there, I think they need to pick and choose
wisely,
because you're a head stomp away from one of your stars in Bellator getting head stomped, and so I don't know. I think you do it with the fights where it's really a no lose. If a champ fights a champ and one of the other champs wins, it's not as devastating as just sending Fedor over there to fight, Baruto and having it, and having him throw out his back and get slammed by a sumo guy, and that's what you don't want to see. So that's just kind of my take on it. But and then after the Shogun fight, we got the Tai Tuivasa and Junior Dos Santos. I think that fight pretty much lived up to what anybody who really knew these fighters would have expected. I think a lot of people thought maybe Dos Santos's chin was a little bit more weathered. But it seems to be holding up pretty strong in his last few fights. And son of a bitch, man, you let that guy land a combination on you, and you're in big, big trouble.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely he said he doesn't mind being the heavyweight division's gatekeeper, and he's definitely making it a hard. He made himself a hard man to get past.
Well, you talk about gatekeeper, and I'll ask you this quick, Yuri. If I told you Dos Santos was fighting Daniel Cormier in a month and a half, who would you pick?
DC.
You'd pick DC? You think he'd outstrike him, or you think he'd just wrestle him down? Because we haven't really seen Dos. I mean, I obviously Kane did his thing against the cage, but I don't know. I guess Cormier could do that, but
I think the Black Emperor throws a lot like the last Emperor. He throws his punches a lot like that. So when you're casting like that, it seems like Cormier almost casts his punches. But I mean, also he had the blueprint with his pal Kane, who did it a couple of times. World-class wrestling, you're going to use it. Just like Anderson Silva, you're going to use it. So I think he would do that and pound him out or do whatever. Junior Dos Santos isn't what he used to be, and we can touch on why or not, but I would pick DC in that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to pick DC based off of their recent resumes, and you can't really pick against DC, I guess. But I just feel like it's a good matchup for Dos Santos. I mean, I don't think there's really any real bad matchups. I think his worst matchup is real crisp strikers, and when he fought Stipe, somebody like that who he's on his game, has really crisp boxing and generally a pretty good chin. Prior to his running into Cormier, but I don't know. I just, people were so quick to count out Dos Santos, and I was one of them too. After a couple of those losses, but I feel like he's kind of regained a lot, and if his chin holds up, um, we've never really seen him wrestled down. We've seen Kane bully him up against the cage and kind of dirty box him to death. But I don't
Yeah.
feel like, unless I'm forgetting a fight, I don't remember him ever on his back. At least not that I can remember. So I don't know. I thought about that, and all of a sudden people talking about how there's not a lot of matchups, and that was just a matchup that jumped out as one that I'd pay to watch. I think it would be a hell of a heavyweight scrap.
I'd watch Junior Dos Santos fight just about anybody, just because we've seen what he's capable of. It's just he's one of those guys to me that you hear a lot of fighters, including Fedor and stuff. That the mind is the weapon, and a lot of times I don't see Junior Dos Santos using it, and we saw that a lot in both Kane fights, which I think they were a little too close together. I would say that those 3 fights were. I think the UFC kind of spent that out real quick, and we kind of everybody's impression was that Kane and Junior Dos Santos were going to run the table for the next 7-8 years, kind of like Fedor Krokop. And it didn't happen like that. But what we saw, I thought, was that Junior Dos Santos kind of didn't have a strong mind that I thought he might have. But he's built a little different. Some people think a little bit differently than they look. But I would still pay to see that guy fight anybody. And I wouldn't. I didn't necessarily pick Tuivasa to beat him. I just wanted to see that fight. It was a good heavyweight fight, and it delivered, in my opinion.
Yeah, just real quick, just to remind fans, I mean, right now, Junior Dos Santos' record stands at 20-5. Take away one of his early losses prior to being in the UFC. His only losses have been twice to Cain Velasquez, once to Overeem in a bit of a questionable stoppage, and then his fight to Stipe Miocic. So, and he's coming off 2 dominant wins over now Tuivasa and Blagoy Ivanov, who a lot of us had some high hopes for. So I don't know. I mean, he's also got a win over Stipe and Ben Rothwell. I mean, the guy's obviously a killer. I just thought that, if Cormier wasn't able to take him down, I don't know if he'd be able to wrestle him against the cage like Kane did. Kane just seems a little bit more muscular and maybe a little bit more strength in the upper body, but again, I could be totally wrong, and Kane could take care of it. So that wraps up the that. I know we need to do the 231 pick, so we're running late on time.
Yeah, that's what we brought Yuri in for, so let's get to it.
I know, but I feel like it would be a crime if we didn't quickly mention the Wilder Fury fight. Just quick takes. Everybody who follows the sport knows that that it ended up being a split draw. What was your scorecard, Yuri?
Oh, I'd probably something like 115, 111 Tyson. I thought it pissed me off. What a bunch of crap, same boxing crap that always happens. And, it's like Canelo and Triple G when they rematched. You're like, it's just so corrupt and so full of shit. But I think 115, 111. But we got to see something that we never thought we would see. That was crazy.
How about, did you catch the fight, Ed?
No.
No? Well, you should. It was a great fight. but I thought Fury won the fight, but he got absolutely blasted twice, dropped. I argue for pride scoring all the time. I know that's not the rules for boxing. I realize that Fury probably should have won the fight on the scorecards. The person who had Wilder 115, 111 was high going into that fight as a judge. The judge who had a draw, I don't have such a big deal with, just because it's, you get knocked down twice and you don't knock the other guy down. I know that's not how it's scored. But I don't have a major issue with the draw. I thought it was a great fight, one of the best heavyweight fights we've seen in a long time, and I actually look forward to the rematch. So I will leave it at that, and we'll get into 231. Main card picks. This event this Saturday night in Toronto, Canada. Opening bout, Jimmy Manuwa versus Thiago Santos. Do your thing, Yuri. Who do you got?
Well, yeah, I mean, actually wrote notes. I listened to Ed, and he's here's my napkin. Reach looks like what 79.5 for Jimmy. Jimmy is 38. I see this as a must win for him. He's lost what 4 of the last 7 and lost 2 straight. At 38, he's fighting 34-year-old Thiago Santos, who's come. This is the crazy thing about Thiago. This is his 5th fight this year, and he's had 12 fights in the UFC in the last 3 years, exactly in the last 3 years, and he's 9-3 in those. He's 34. He's younger. He's hungry. I think Jimmy might be on his way out. I'm picking Thiago Santos in that.
Me too. We're on the same page, pretty much, Yuri, for all the right reasons, for all the same reasons.
I'm going with Jimmy Manua. Every time I get behind Thiago Santos, he has a letdown fight. Whether it's obviously he's not fighting Gegard Musashi this fight, but I feel like every time it's 3 losses. Seems like he wins 3, and then he takes like a loss in a fight where he doesn't really show up. I feel like the amount of fights could catch up with him. He's coming off a great win over Kevin Holland and Eric Anders, but I'm gonna go with Manua. I think he's gonna catch him, and I just think it's going to bring Santos down to earth. He's having his 2nd fight now at 205. The Anders fight was a 205, but that was against Anders, who's generally a 185er. So I think now he's going to actually fight a true 205 fighter who probably walks around, closer to 230. And so I'll go with Manua just based off of an instinct that Santos, tends to not be able to put the huge win streaks together. The next fight is not one that I'm super familiar with. Hakeem Dawodu versus Kyle Bochniak. I know Bochniak coming off of his a decision loss to Megomed Shapirov in a fight where he stood in there and took it on the chin, but got through all 3 rounds. I don't really have a real take on that fight. You got notes for that one too, Yuri?
Absolutely not.
I do.
All right, Ed.
So Dawodu is he's a World Series of Fighting vet. And he did really well there. He's 1-1 in the UFC, but I think he's actually he's actually got a better chance of taking out Bochniak only because he was making his way in from crossing over. He's part of that. He's part of the when World Series of Fighting was transitioning to PFL, and the guys that went to the UFC, David Branch, Marlon Moraes. So he's one of the up and comers from WSOF that made the same move. So I think Dawodu could outwork him just because he went six straight wins before he got to the UFC. So that's why I'm going with Dawodu.
Yeah, you mentioned that, and I did do a little bit of research. So I go with Dawodu as well because he has a win over a Megomed, while Bochniak has a loss to a Megomed Shapirov. So, if you got a Megomed on your record, he beat Marat Megomed. He actually had a draw, and then he beat him in World Series of Fighting.
Yeah.
So I'll go with Dawodu based off the fact that he beat a Megomed, and we know how tough those Megomeds are.
Yeah.
So, do you remember that one? That one World Series of Fighting, I swear, half of them was a Megomed, half the entire card.
Yeah, I think we previewed that one. That was one of the Megomed. It was just recently. It was I think it was a PFL card. There was like 6 Megomeds on the card. So
PFL
they just got them in a freezer and they're pulling out Megomeds.
Yeah, I think there was one guy named Megomed Sharov.
yeah.
So that's kind of become a running joke here. But what do you got to say?
No, I actually had that explained to me by one of my training partners that has something to do with their region or something that they're from. And I mean that's for another episode.
So then we go to a welterweight clash. Alex Cowboy Oliveira versus the submission ace Gunnar Nelson. I'll give my take real quick. I'm a big fan of Cowboy Oliveira. I think he's one of the more underrated fighters in the UFC.
Mm-hmm.
I know he's got some tough losses to some really good competition. I think he's just too much for Gunnar Nelson on the feet, and I think he's too good on the ground. I think he'll avoid submissions and probably pound out Gunnar Nelson by TKO. While Gunnar's probably has him in his guard or half guard, but I think he'll just lay too much wood and do too much damage and stop Gunnar Nelson.
Yeah, no, I've got to agree. I don't know if it's going to be a stoppage or what, but I'm definitely leaning Cowboy, which hurts because Gunner's my Icelandic blood brother out there, and he needs to do something. But he's a really old, 30 years old, I think, Gunner, and it's kind of weird like that sometimes. So, but I'm going Cowboy with that too. He's just crisp, fast, and like you said, I think he's a little bit underrated.
Yeah, I'm also going Oliveira too, and I agree with you. I mean, 30 is not as pretty old for combat sports. You know, the sport ages those guys pretty fast with the wear and tear that they take. So, Oliveira's got he's got two performance of the night bonuses that he's won, and even when he lost, he still got a fight of the night on his record award. So, he's definitely he's bringing more to the table.
Then in the co-main event, we finally get a women's flyweight title fight after Nico Montano was stripped of her belt after she defeated Roxanne Modafari at the Ultimate Fighter finale, and then missed weight and had to go to the hospital in her scheduled bout against Shevchenko. This time, though, we get Valentina Shevchenko versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk, the former strawweight champion, moving up to fight really the consensus number one fighter in the flyweight division in the UFC. Um, I got to go with Shevchenko based off her size. She was able to hang with Nunes, who's now going up to 145 to fight Cyborg. When they had two bouts at 135, arguably won the first fight, arguably won both fights. To be humble about it. Shevchenko's too tough. I think she has too much size. She's already 2-0, I believe, against Joanna in kickboxing bouts prior to the UFC career. Not that that means a ton, but mentally it's got to really help her going into the cage. I imagine she's gonna believe she's pretty superior going in there. What do you say, Ed?
Um, that this is one of the ones I'm having trouble with, and I'm siding with you on the size difference, but this is also a heavier weight for Joanna, so I don't know if that helps her or hinders her. You know, as far as her output, she's been known to put out more in the later rounds when she fights someone. But like you said, I mean, if they both go toe to toe and try to strike each other, history says Shevchenko beats her, and Shevchenko's also more comfortable fighting at this weight. Not and again, it's I know it should be easier for Joanna because she's not cutting those 10 extra pounds, but it's still going to be something that the weight will exhaust her, and she might lose a step in her output. So I'm actually having a hard time picking this one. I it's MMA. It's not Muay Thai. So I don't know. I'm on the fence. I feel like you're right with the weight of Shevchenko just being a bigger person for her to fight. But I don't know. I think the rule difference and Joanna's craziness to get a belt back around her waist might also be a factor. So I'm on the fence. I'm on the fence, and I can't really pick one yet.
That's interesting you say that. And let me just say this about the card real quick. This is a good card in that it seems we're making our picks, but all these fights and the one that we're going to discuss could go either way. It's that good, and that's what I like about this fight. In fact, when I'm writing down my notes, and by the way, in kickboxing Muay Thai, it was actually they had three fights and three. She was 3-0, and I watched them. And one of Joanna's complaints about all that was that. It was that Valentina was, a lot of tripping, a lot of things that, don't come into play when it comes to point fighting in Muay Thai and with pads and those fights. But she's 3-0 against her. That said, you could see that Valentina was bullying her around. Like you said, Matt, you see a lot of that power. Obviously, it all goes to Valentina. If Joanna was a double black belt in jiu-jitsu, I'm giving this fight to her. Because if it goes to the ground, I see her being able to pull something off. But I think she keeps it on the feet. And this one is weird. I actually wrote this down as a draw because for the same
Yeah.
reasons that you mentioned, Ed, that she wants that belt so bad around her. Those fights in kickboxing, that was 2006, 7, and 8.
Yeah.
So we're beyond 10 years and to a dozen years. And obviously it's different rules and stuff, but could be a split draw. I don't see a stoppage in this one. I see it going to a decision. A close one. I don't know. So I'm going to go just on record as saying Valentina because she's bigger, tougher, and there's the size differences there. But I think it should make for a real good fight. I hope I'm right.
Do we know?
Well,
Do we know what weight they fought at when they fought in Muay Thai?
I want to say 115, but I don't quote me.
So the only thing that makes it hard for me too to pick, because if it does go to the ground, like obviously the trips and all that stuff will be allowed, but I mean Joanna has survived black belts submission. You know, she survived Godella twice, so I think she's got the you know this. I think she's savvy enough to avoid a submission. I know Shevchenko has pulled off a few slick submissions recently. You know, in her recent fights, but I don't know. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. I mean, yeah. I mean, I think I'm gonna stick with Matt and try and lean Shevchenko.
yeah, I mean, to Yuri's point, hopefully it's not a draw. That division needs some kind of stability right now, and a draw would, we might be talking about them getting rid of that division at that point if they can't, if they go a full year and a half without a fighting champion. So,
Well,
uh,
Can you imagine fighting 3 times in Muay Thai and then coming over to the UFC and drawing? I don't think the UFC would be sad about that because they'd sell the hell out of the second one. But
no, yeah, I mean, I say that just from the perspective of the other fighters in the division that
yeah,
that fight needs to
be
crown a
decisive.
champ. I think so. I think it needs to crown a champion so that division can really start to take off. There's a lot of talent there and a lot of potential good fights, and I I think that the UFC's kind of dropped the ball a little bit with how they can't really control the Nico Montano situation, but that's unfortunately how it unfolded, and they need a way out now. And I think crowning one of these women a decisive champion would be big for the future of that division. Then we get to looking forward to the main event, one of the most talked about fights, and one of the best potential fights that the UFC can put together. Champion Max Holloway faces Brian Ortega for the featherweight championship of the world. Why don't you go ahead, Ed? You got there.
You know, I'm surprised that when the odds were first posted for this fight, that Ortega was the underdog because I have him winning, just based on his. He's another guy. He's got a lot of mass. He's got reach over a Holloway from the last face off I saw them do. But I mean, I'm also concerned, and I'm not trying to jinx it, but I mean, it's been coming up. I mean, even Ortega said it on the media day yesterday or today that I mean, Holloway's been doing his media appearances, and it doesn't look like he's better from why they pulled him off the last card. So, I mean, don't be surprised if Shevchenko and Joanna wind up being our main event on Saturday last minute. But let's be positive. I mean, because of Holloway's been a great champion and stuff, but because of all that stuff that's going on, and they still can't figure out what went on. You know, he's been inactive. He might not be healthy that we know of, or he even knows of. I mean, he's a purple belt in jiu-jitsu versus Ortega's black belt, and you know, Ortega's shown that he can put people away standing up too. And the guy he put away was someone that never been knocked out before in Frankie Edgar. So I think everything, if the fight does happen, I see Ortega winning.
How about you, Yuri?
I agree. We're seeing Holloway as the favorite there. I don't want to bring up that other thing too much because it's been talked about. So as Ed said, I'll stay on the positive with this. This is another one that, man, it is so close. You look at the guys that Holloway lost to, all great guys, but these people the media is talking about him being an unstoppable force. Duke Rufus, Zabi, Mendez, Javier Mendez, and Mark Henry and Danny Castillo. All these guys are picking Holloway, and for good reason. But I just, when I look at Ortega, let's see, we've got, there's 3 inches. Holloway's got 3 inches on him, but the reach is virtually identical. So, but I can see something like Ortega being in a situation where they're up along the fence. He's got to clinch, maybe an uppercut, wobbles him a little bit. He gets the takedown. So I just picture the fight as being one where Ortega, somewhere down the line, gets a hold of him and, scruffles up on the fence. And either it finishes. That's kind of the feeling I'm getting, that Ortega is going to finish him late.
Yeah, I'm actually assuming everybody's healthy and we get a fight of two fighters fully prepared and physically there. I'm going with Holloway. Since the day the fight was announced, I see him right now as uh, being pretty much top ball game in that division. I don't think the fight will end up on the ground. I think it'll end up being a striking fight, and I think Max will be able to take Ortega into deeper waters than he's used to standing. Um, we know Max isn't afraid to get in there and just full on trade. So I think situations like that might not favor Ortega. Um, I mean, I hope that they're both healthy and this is the fight that we all want it to be because it has potential this for greatness. But I got Holloway. I think Ortega. I generally will go with the champion fighting a guy who's in his first real main event. Where and it might be as Ortega main. I guess he main evented with Cub Swanson
Yeah.
in Fresno last. I think it was last December. But you know, I feel like the spotlight gets real big, and I generally like to lean towards the guys that have been through it, and that might not mean that they don't have a rematch down the line and Ortega beats him, but I think the experience and just the willingness that I know Holloway is willing to basically go to the death in the cage. I lean towards him in this specific fight. To your point, Ed, about the fight possibly being canceled, we obviously know that it never seems to really work out. But as far as I know, Renato Moicano is a
Oh,
full on
that's right. Yeah.
backup for either fighter. Um, uh, Ortega already has a win over him, so obviously that wouldn't make for necessarily the best title fight. But and it maybe perhaps not even the main event if that were to happen. It still could end up being Valentina Shevchenko and Joanna, but there is a backup that's supposedly in place, so that if only one of the two guys is able to go, we still either get to watch Holloway or Ortega.
Yeah, I mean Ortega's never had issues, and he said he's being ready. He said he's fighting. I guess that's why he said he's fighting on Saturday, regardless of what happens with Holloway's health.
Yeah,
So
no, but we know how the fight game goes. He
yeah,
he could slip in the shower and all of a sudden, I don't know a lot about the Toronto Commission.
say hi to Skip Bayless and blow out his knee.
Yeah, I mean, there's always we know that craziness happens. He gets food poisoning.
Yeah,
I don't know the Toronto Commission all that well, so I don't really know how strict they are. Or, if obviously if this fight was in New York, it would go up 10 or 15% chance of something being canceled.
yeah.
Um, but that's
Let
it. So
me
that go ahead, real
let
quick.
me ask you guys this. This is one thing I was wondering. I didn't see that any judges were picked. I thought that that was important, particularly with this card, because a lot of these fights I see is real close. I didn't see that they picked the judges, and that kind of matters. Have you guys heard anything on that?
No,
No,
Generally,
just
you'll hear that they're
broadcast stuff.
announced. I don't know, 2 3 weeks out, something like that, and I didn't see that yet anywhere.
yeah, I don't know. That could come down to the Canadian Commission. Maybe they don't. I don't know. Maybe to avoid corruption or
Yeah, I mean
letting people
they've had
influence.
their issues with combat sports in Canada, so
Yeah, I mean it's
yeah,
nice to know ahead of time, but I could also see why you wouldn't necessarily want a referee announced. You open him up to possible corruption, 2 weeks in advance, as opposed to maybe 24 hours in advance. A lot less people can get a hold of the guy, or who knows? This is combat sports, and the history has and that could go for judges as well. So I don't,
Well,
but I don't know. That is a good point. I haven't heard anything about it.
yeah, and no, and it was the judges. I'm sorry, it was actually the judges that I meant, but yeah.
Did they say the referee was?
No, I don't have information on either of those, and that because these fights are so close, it could be that Gunnar Nelson goes the distance with Oliveira, and who knows? So I haven't heard anything on any of the officiating from any scope yet, and I thought that was a little bit odd.
Cool. Yeah, it'll be interesting. Good fights. Like I said, we had the Combate Americas tournament Friday, then the UFC on Saturday. Glory has an 8-man throwback heavyweight tournament on Saturday morning on Fight Pass. Sunday, Polaris and EBI are on. Fight Pass. I think Fight Pass has 7 events this weekend, so I'm not gonna look up or go through every one. But there's obviously a ton of action again coming off of last weekend, so lots of quick naps and then fight time all weekend long. Thanks again for joining us, Yuri. I know you can be found on Twitter at Spark Yuri. And you're at or your Spark Yuri on the MMAcommunity.com forum as well as the Underground forum. So again, thanks for the contribution to the site, and thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me. Let me give a shout out because I know Birdwatcher just loves this shirt, and this was my secret Santa from the MMA community for Ben Wawa, and Ben Wawa spends a lot of time over at Masato Toys Forum, which is a great forum, and Evil Yoshida.
I thought that was an Aquaman shirt for some reason.
No, I don't know if you noticed this, but I got the Khabib kind of thing going here, and then I've got the gay Star of David going on here. I'm a walking dichotomy. I don't know. So, but anyway, shout out to those guys, and thanks, guys, for having me again. It was fun.
Thank you, man. Thanks for the support.
Yeah, and as usual, everybody can follow us at Combat Hour on Twitter. Myself at MMA Hawk 21 on Twitter and Instagram. You can follow Ed at Carbazal on Twitter and at Carbeerzal on Instagram. Again, we're always looking for any donations through the Anchor app. You can donate to the podcast. We've picked up a couple smaller sponsors that we get paid for clicks. So even if you watch this on YouTube, if you don't mind clicking on the links on iTunes or any of the audio, it could really help the show. So again,
just make sure you subscribe on Google Play, Apple, anywhere podcasts are played.
Exactly. Any subscriptions, any clicks, really help the show out, and as we continue to want to grow and go places with this thing. So again, good talking to you, Yuri. As usual, Ed, we'll keep in touch this week as the fights unfold, and another busy week, man. Talk to you next week.
See ya.